guys are probably wondering why I have the radio of the Mark IV Supra out. Well, yet another thing is broken on this car, and it's the radio. So it's not the radio that's actually bad, but the ground wire, and this was actually attached. I actually pulled it out for testing. But the ground wire on the back of the factory harness came loose here. I don't know if you guys can see that. Let me try to focus in on it. But yeah, the wire is out, and so it's not providing a ground, but it also wasn't making any noises. You weren't getting anything out of the speaker. So come to find out, the factory speaker, or the factory amp that's sitting over there now, is in play. Fortunately enough, on Toyotas though, it's easy to bypass the amp. So this is the amp wiring here. So this goes down to the amp, and then the amp outputs to the speakers, and that wire actually comes up through through these two connectors right here. And so if you have a car, a Toyota, that doesn't have an amp, you actually just wire the radio into these. You wire the radio in these, and bam, you'll get speaker, and then you'll bypass the amp. So I've already ordered that harness. Fortunately enough, that's just your standard Metro harness, and I'm going to redo it. When I was working on it though, I also found out that he's only got one speaker hooked up out of the 4. So here are the wires here. And these two white ones were stripped just because I stripped it to jam it into this connector here to check to see if we get any noise out of it. And jamming it in there, we get noise out of that one speaker over there on the door. Anyways, so now we can, this is another thing that we're going to toss out, and that's going to go bye-bye, and we're not going to use that anymore. I originally thought that they had cut it and hardwired here, because when I was feeling underneath, I felt this wire that was cut. But it was not. It was just, I don't know what the hell this is for, but it's something that they cut and wired there. But anyways, so that's done. That's out of the way. Now we can actually take our max ECU and set it down in here in place of wherever this amp should have mounted up, and figure all that out. So definitely some more work that's not intended, but here we are. Okay, so we got the Metro harness here, and if all goes well, it should just plug into the factory harness here and then bypass the amp. All right, not exactly what I do, but wiring is done for the radio. So now I can actually start putting this all back together. I found some more goofy wiring in here. It's like this random fuse that has power. Then it goes down to this green wire. Then it changes to some other wire down here. No idea what it's for, not messing with it. What I can tell you though is that it's poorly tapped here with some electric tape that's not even holding anymore. But I'm going to isolate that because I don't know what it's for and I don't want to mess with it. I'm not trying to do any extra work that I didn't have to, like this, but this is done, so that's good. Go ahead and cut that off. We'll go ahead and heat shrink all of these ends, but that means that all the speakers are working and the factory amp is bypassed, and we can move on. So I think this is where the max DC is going to live. There's this the factory amp bracket here. So the amp sits kind of like this. Obviously, like I said, we're getting rid of the amp altogether, but we could always make a plate that mounts the exact same way here. And I don't know if it needs to be raised like that or not. I don't think so, just because it's not building a ton of heat or anything. But the problem that we have is that the hole that the ECU used to go to, or the amp used to mount to, is broken. I don't know if this was a Phillips or what, but I don't know. I think that is a Phillips and something's stuck in it. But we can use that, and we can kind of mount the ECU like this. This is kind of the way I was going anyways, because I wanted the harness to come out and then basically ride along this the seal here. So I do want to mention here that we have a couple of parts here from the guys over at Amp EFI, aka DIY Auto Tune here. So this is, we've got two of these. This is their external VR conditioners, and we're actually using these for speed sensors. So we're going to tap into the ABS modules, or into the ABS module, to steal wheel speed sensor. Now, fortunately enough, the owner reminded me that one of the front wheel speed sensors are not working, but we only need one of each. So we need one for the rear and one for the front. And we're not setting it up. We are setting it up wiring wise currently, but we're not going to fully set it up. But the goal is to have traction control eventually. Now this other one is a tach adapter. So as you guys know, after we got the sweet cluster rebuilt and brought back, we still couldn't get tach signal out of it. Tach wasn't working. So we're going to use this tack module here, and hopefully once we wire this in, we'll get working tack. So that is my plan. My plan basically is we're going to go ahead and start running the wires for this mess right here. I'm going to make a nice little incision into the carpet and run the wires up into it, and then hopefully that's going to be like the resting place. Then from there we'll figure out how to mount these modules. So these modules, I haven't really decided where they're going to be, because there is 3 of them. They're not very big, but they do take up space. And what I'm thinking about these 3 though is because they are partially going to the ECU and the cluster itself. So this has to really go into a couple different places. It's going to be ABS, next to the ABS module, the gauge cluster, and the ECU itself. So I got to find the center location for all of that, and I think the best place for that is going to be where the AEM is, which is up in this little corner here, is what my thoughts are. All right, so I've basically decided that this is where the ECU is going to sit. I've got the vacuum line, the main vacuum line from the engine to the ECU ran. I've got some wires that I still have to untangle here, but nothing too crazy. The really kind of shitty and scary part though was that I got a little bit too gung-ho with it and started moving harnesses around without paying attention to it. So even I myself will have to go back and review my videos to find out where everything went, which is not a big deal. That's actually the reason why we started making these videos to begin with, is to kind of just recall what everything was. Fortunately enough that these are all labeled. If you look at it, you may not be able to see it, but there's printed labeling on this, and you know, my wiring always refers to the factory wiring labels, so it shouldn't be too bad. Anyways, but yeah, so as you can see, this is kind of the harness routed through, and you can see that my shitty plug and play adapter is sitting over there, and this is all the wires that are going to go. So we do seem to have enough length to run over here and tuck everything in this little corner here. It's gonna suck once it comes down to actually mounting everything, because there is quite a bit of stuff here, but it shouldn't be the end of the world. So there, not much to show here. Just got some of the wires done, not fully done, but we've got the injectors and the coils all wired up and heat shrinked and all labeled, etc, etc. We've got a bunch here. There's a handful of wiring here that needs to be done, obviously, but that's essentially where everything is going to go. So we've got a couple more wires here to knock out, and then we should be able to route this connector where it needs to go. And so the reason why we're doing all this now is because that eventually when it gets done, I have to seal this all up, so I need to label everything just to make it easier for whoever works on it next, whether it's me or somebody else. So we got the wiring done, so I'm going to test it real quick here, and if all goes well, the car should start. All right, so car starts. We're going to grab the laptop here in a second. We're going to grab our laptop here in a second and just check to make sure that we've got all of our signals and stuff. We're almost on the final step here on the Supra. What we've got left to do is tap into the ABS wheel speed sensors. So these are the connectors on the ABS module. Keep in mind that NA and TT ones are completely different. So this car started life as an NA, has an NA ABS module, but what we're looking for is this third pin from the right, which is this blue one. So 1, 2, 3, and then on the opposing side is the one right below it, which is red, and this represents the front right wheel speed sensor. Then on this other connector, we're actually after this pink and blue one at the end, and that is the rear right wheel speed sensors. Now keep in mind that there is polarity. These are VR sensors, so they do have polarity on them. So I've got 2 sets of wire here, which is red and black, and obviously that's going to go to positive, negative respectively. And so we've got two pairs of those, and we're going to just tap into them. Once we tap into them, they'll go into the DIY little module that I've got floating around somewhere. This one's the tack one, but I've got the speed one floating around somewhere, I promise. So we have to have 2 of those though, because they only support one single VR sensors. So obviously we have a front and rear, so we needed 2 of those. So we're gonna go ahead and get started on that and tapping them in. Tapping them in is always a bear because there's barely any room here. On the TT models, the ABS module is in the center console, which is a little bit better. You got a little bit more access to it, but still a pain in the ass regardless. So this is the pink and blue wires. I've depinned them, and the pink wire goes onto the bottom. Now the connector is upside down, but the pink does in fact go on the bottom, which is currently orientated at the top. And so normally, you guys know, I'll just cut and splice into this, but the reason why I depinned this is because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to strip the wires a little bit better and then put heat shrink over it. Now the reason why is that VR sensors are really sensitive to noise, and since we're tapping into them, we really want to try to keep the connection as good as possible, that way that we don't introduce any more noise to it. Now a lot of guys are probably wondering why I just didn't tap the ABS wheel speed sensor directly into the max ECU. Now yes, you could do that, but I don't recommend that, because in order for a VR sensor to work, you have to actually add, you know, your signal plus sensor ground. And so now you'd be introducing another sensor ground into the equation, and it may not play well. You may get away with it because it's an older system, it may not, but like I said, it doesn't take too long to depin these, so let's just go ahead and do it that way. So these 2 are done, and they're plugged back into their respective connectors here. Now I do want to mention that the blue wire on each side is actually different. So the blue wire on this connector is actually the negative, and while this one on the other connector is positive. So that's probably why you're wondering, if you catch this and you're wondering why the wires are different, that's why. It's because their functionality is different. So this is done. Now at this point, we're going to start adding in our little modules from DIY. Whenever to these modules, this is the AXM 120, and I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see this, but the reason why I'm so particular about knowing which wire is which is because that if you look here, there's a specific spot for the VR positive and VR negative. So that's where our 2 wheel speed sensors will go, and that's per unit. Then we've got the output, which is actually going to an input on the ECU, and then we have 12-volt power and ground. Okay, and so basically what's going to happen now is that these 2 out wires are going to go into the max over here for our front and rear speed sensor inputs. Then we're going to have to get a wire, one of the green wires, one of the output wires, and it's going to tap into the speed sensor wiring for the speedometer. So we got our sensors labeled. These could be heated up just a little bit more. Some of the adhesive's not fully out yet, but it's just for labeling, so I'm not too concerned about it. So I'm using this obviously for labeling and just to kind of keep the wires tidy. So we're going to be able to plug these guys in, and now obviously just by simply grabbing the harness and looking at it, we'll know which one's which, so I won't get confused, and whoever ends up working on this after me won't either. So after racking my brain for a little bit, I don't know why I didn't think about this until now, but pins 2 and pins 12 right here are actually ground and key on. So I'm just going to tap into these 2 as well, and then we're going to have power and ground all right next to each other. And then obviously once we get it all tapped in, I'll label the 2 wires, and then bam, we'll have power and ground, and then we'll be good to go. All right, so we got the front wheel speed right here. Go ahead and spin it. And as you can see, it works. So we'll go ahead and start working on that rear one. So we've got the wiring cleaned up quite a bit more. It's obviously not completely done yet, but it's starting to get there. So I ended up using a DT connector for our exterior outputs. So these are lambda heater, fan, and boost control solenoid all into this little connector here. Obviously we have the speed sensor adapters here. I have this is just wrapped up. This is all additional extra stuff, 7 and 8 injector slash ignition outputs that we're not using. And then we've got some service loops in here. So what's basically left now is just tidying up the rest of it. We're waiting on the bracket for the ECU here to get in. So we have speed sensor working for the right wheels. The last two things that I need to actually wire up is going to be the actual speed sensor output. So the speed sensor output comes from the ECU, and it's going to feed the speedometer over there. We're going to tap it in through here, but I don't want to do that just yet because we still have to do, we still got to figure out the tachometer ordeal as well. So, but this is basically the wires cleaned up a bit more. Is it all the way cleaned up? Not quite, obviously, but it is definitely getting there. I plan to, my goal is anyways, is to use another DT connector, and we'll tap into here for the tachometer and the speedometer through this wiring over here. Now we have to tap into the backside, and the reason is that one of these pins from whoever made the original harness pulled out a while back, but we're just going to tap it through the back here once I find the pins, and then that will, like I said, we'll do the tachometer / speedometer output wiring, and then that should be it. Now, so here we are on the final piece of this. I've already tapped in the speed sensor and the tachometer wire here. So speed sensor is this blue red pin in the corner here, and then the black white pin here is tachometer. And so speedometer is our green wire, and then our tachometer is this brown wire, and that's going to run into the ECU or something like that somewhere, but that's all done. So I can start basically wrapping all this stuff up. I'm going to figure out the clutch input on that side and then run that wire over here to the ECU as well. But for the most part, it's basically done, and if I really wanted to, I could just wrap this all up. But like I said, we have a couple other inputs that I want to wire in just to put the icing on the cake, and then we should be good to go. So now with the key on, we should have a speedometer sweep. So speedo is working. Probably will need to be calibrated, but it is working.